Hey, this is Steve McGill here of the hurdlesfirst.com and the Hurdle Magazine. I'm going to talk some today about the relationship between sprint mechanics and hurdling mechanics. Okay, because a lot of times, as I've said plenty of times before, flaws in hurdling mechanics are rooted in flaws in sprint mechanics. And as a hurdles coach, it's often a common mistake to look at the hurdle flaws and try to correct those, not realizing that they're rooted in basic flaws in sprint mechanics. Okay, so I want to talk about specifically back kick as it applies to hurdlers. All right, especially with the style of hurdling that I teach that emphasizes a cyclical action over the hurdles as opposed to a snap and a kick and a snap. Okay, so this cyclical style, you have to make sure that your legs are always coming up and coming in front. Whereas with the kick and snap style, back kick is kind of the norm for that actually. So the idea that I'm talking about is called front side mechanics. I'm sure if you're a sprint coach or hurdle coach, you're familiar with that term. I first heard the term back in 2004 when I was at Coach Curtis Fry's clinic in South Carolina. I remember that weekend vividly because that was the same weekend of the Malice in the Palace between the Detroit Pistons and the Indiana Pacers. I remember going to my hotel room and seeing that big brawl and the players in the stands and everything. So the date of that clinic is etched in stone because of that event that I watched on TV. But anyway, Coach Fry in that clinic was explaining front side mechanics, which basically means that when your foot leaves the ground, you push off the ground and your foot leaves the ground, you want to come up and in front. Your knee and your heel come up and in front and not to kick back. If you look at video of old sprinters from the 70s and 80s and old hurdlers from those eras, you'll see a lot of back kick and how they run. And so this idea of front side mechanics was, I guess, fairly new, but 2004 was definitely new to me. And so after attending that clinic, I really started to really emphasize and take note of how sprint mechanics directly affected hurdle mechanics. Okay, so back kick basically prevents you from being able to do everything I tell you to do. Okay, so if I'm telling you I want you to cycle your legs, back kick will prevent you from being able to cycle. There will have to be a kick action at some point if that the lead leg goes back before it comes up into the front. Okay, and so you might be understanding what I'm trying to tell you to do. You might be trying to do what I'm telling you to do, but you won't be able to do what I'm telling you to do. You won't be able to cycle if your stride begins with back kick. Okay, if you are kicking back in your strides between the hurdles. Okay. I want to take a look at some videos, one of a professional female athlete who's running in the 12.9 range, who's really good and has kind of ingrained a habit of running with back kick in her sprinting strides and hasn't ever corrected it. And so it causes her to have some kick in the hurdling action as a result. So in this first photo here, you'll see that her knee is her knee is pointing down, and her heel is coming up and almost kicking her butt. Okay, that's exactly what we don't want. Okay, we never want the knee pointing down. It's okay for the knee to point forward, which I'll show a little bit later here, but we don't want the knee pointing down, and we don't want that heel coming up like that. That's what we call back kick. Okay, and the next frame, you see here the knee is starting to drive forward, but it's taking a longer path than it would have if she had started with the knee forward to begin with. Okay, you can also see that the heel is behind her as opposed to under her. We want the heel under the hamstring, not behind the hamstring. Okay, so from this position, there's no doubt that she's going to what's the word I'm using? Kick. She's going to kick at some point in her hurdle action. Okay. So next frame, you see that she is driving the knee forward, so she knows what to do. So she is driving the knee forward, And we do see that her foot is behind the knee, so the knee is leading the way. Okay, her arms are kind of side to side. That's a different issue for a different day. Uh, but she is driving the knee forward, so things look pretty good right here. Okay. Next frame, she is extending the leg, and we can see that her knee is higher than her foot, which is good, and her heel is low to the bar, right? So she's in position where she can go ahead and attack the track now. She can continue her downward flight back to the ground, right? But she won't. Okay, look at the next frame. Okay, next frame, you see that the heel is higher than it was in the previous frame. Okay, higher than the bar, higher over the bar than it was in the previous frame. And you can see that the leg has locked. Okay, so she's locked at the knee. Okay, that locking at the knee, and the reason that the foot kicked up is because of the back kick that we saw in the previous stride. Okay, it's inevitable. So for hurdlers who are trying to fix that sort of kicking action, and you're focusing on it as a hurdle issue, you'll never be able to fix it. You have to focus on it as a sprint mechanic issue. Okay, so next frame. All right, we see that she rebends her knee. Okay, so she had her knee driving before, and then she locked it, and now she's unlocked it, and now it's attacking the track. So that's an extra motion she had to add. Once you lock it, you have to unlock it, right? And so if she had come from the front from the beginning, if she hadn't kicked back from the beginning, she wouldn't have to lock and unlock like she has here. Okay, so what do we want the action to look like? Okay, so that's what it looks like when it's flawed, with the knee pointing down, the heel kicking up, kicking back, I should say. How does it look like when it's done right? All right, so let's take a look at this athlete, one of my regulars who I coach, and one of the drills that I had him do was a quick step drill. So he's moving quickly, although he's not sprinting like he would in a race in this drill. So his name is Brandon. So Brandon here, if you look at the leg that's in the air, okay, which is his lead leg, you'll see that the knee is pointing forward, not downward. Okay, and you'll see that his heel is that the foreleg is directly parallel to the track. Okay, that's the angle that we want. So it's not that much different from what we saw with the female athlete, but that little bit of difference is a huge difference. The knee pointing forward versus the knee pointing down is everything in terms of being able to cycle your legs over the hurdle. Okay, and having that heel and in a parallel angle to the track. Okay, is so important, as opposed to having the heel come up and almost kick the butt. Okay, from this position, he can drive the knee up and attack the hurdle. See the next frame? Okay, so now he's driving at the hurdle. We see the knee leading the way. Okay, he's starting to lean forward. He's pushing off the ground, and everything's looking like it's going to be in a nice straight line. Okay, next frame, we see the knee drive up. Excellent. Okay, so the knee is higher than the bar now, and the heel is directly under the knee, which means that as he's attacking the hurdle, the knee is still leading the way. The knee is still the steering wheel, which is what we want. Okay. Next frame, he attacks the hurdle. He's leaning forward now. He's got his heel almost at the bar. So in this position, he can continue to cycle downward. All right. So with the last athlete that we looked at, we saw that she kicked up from this position. So even though she had already had the height she needed to clear the hurdle, she kicked up. And why did she kick up? Because she started with back kick before she left the ground, right? And then inevitably the leg was going to kick up, was going to swing up. Okay, so he's in the same position here that she was at that same time. And in the next frame, you'll see that he does in fact continue to cycle downward. Okay, that's what we want. Okay, this is what I always refer to as a downhill angle. Okay, you've put your body in a position where you feel like the hurdle is small and you are tall, and you're coming at the hurdle from a downhill angle, so that when you land, you are faster coming off the hurdle than you were going into it. That's the idea. Okay, just like when you run down a hill, you're faster at the bottom of the hill than you would have been if the hill hadn't been there. Okay, so next frame, he continues a downward motion, and he's going to be in good position to sprint off the hurdle as the lead leg will continue to extend to the ground, and the trail leg will come to the front. You also see how his trail leg is nice and tight. The knee is leading the way there as well. So the knee is leading the way, meaning that it'll be right at his chest, facing the front by the time the lead leg lands. Okay, so how do you correct back kick is the next question. Okay, so the answer to that would be you gotta go backwards to go forward, so to speak. You kind of have to start by going back to your A skips and your A marches and all that kind of stuff to teach yourself the motion, so those hip flexors are doing the work for you. Okay, when you're doing it right, you know, front side, your hip flexors are doing work. When you're doing it wrong with back kick, your hamstrings are doing most of the work. So you want to feel it in your hip flexors. Okay, and then you go through the gamut of drills. I say that the marching popovers that we use are a good drill. You could probably do some sprinting at a slower speed at 50 to 60% of full speed to kind of get used to the idea of eliminating that big back kick and cycling in front. Okay, I always say you can't literally eliminate back kick. The foot's going to go back some just because you're pushing off the ground with some force, but you don't want the angle to be so much that the knee is pointing downward. Okay, that's the no. That's what you're trying to avoid. Okay, so with everything else, you know, you have to break it down to its smallest levels, the simplest levels, and then gradually build your way back up. Okay, and add more speed to it as you get more confident with it. But it's for beginners who haven't hurdled before should be taught front side mechanics from the beginning of their hurdling life, because you don't want to ingrain bad habits and try to get rid of them. Okay, so if you've been running successfully with backside mechanics for a long time, and you've learned to just kind of power your way through it, and then you try to fix it, it's going to be a lot harder. Okay, so you want to try to get that nipped in the bud, so to speak, right when you start your hurdling, whatever age at which you start. Okay, so coaches have to be very, very cognizant of the fact that when you're teaching a new hurdler how to hurdle, or teaching an advanced hurdler how to hurdle better, that you have to look at how they sprint. You have to evaluate that and look for any micro flaws in their sprint mechanics. All right, thank you, and I'll be back next week with another teaching video. All right, peace.